Meneer van Zyl, thank you so much for joining us on the virtual Mkuku. We're looking to learn about the work that you do, specifically with the organization you represent. So I think just to start off, what is Afriforum and what do you do at Afriforum specifically?
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Penwell. I think because of the nature of my work, it's always a fun and enjoyable experience to share about some of the things we do, because it makes me so excited and something. It's not just like being doing a boring job. It's a very exciting and future-orientated job. But when it comes to, firstly, my position, I'm a campaigns officer for strategy and content at Afriforum. So I identify campaigns, I design campaigns, I write opinion pieces, I write reports, I do spokesperson work. So you'll maybe once in a while see me on ENCA or on Newsroom Africa, or hear me on Power FM or on RSG. But then also the broader organization, Afriforum, what we do is, we could just talk for an hour about specifically the organization's mission, but I'll keep it as simple as possible. We're a civil rights organization that firstly wants to make sure that our membership has a future in South Africa and that our members are able to see a future here in Southern Africa. So what does that mean? That means that our membership, which is currently stands at 309,000 members,
Crazy.
They give us money so that we can make sure that their future is a realistic one and that it's not a future that makes them hopeless. We are there to give them hope. But we also do a lot of things that are not directly just to benefit our members. But let's start off with our members and then move from there. So for our members, we, for example, for potholes, specifically in where most of our members are concentrated, but also in other areas, we paint street signs. We have over 150 branches all across the country. These different branches, they plant trees, they organize community projects, they plant community vegetable gardens, and they are mostly concentrated where our members are, because our members' money is making what they do possible.
Yeah.
Then there's also our massive neighborhood watch network, which is, I think, more than 150 neighborhood watches all across the country, and they patrol the streets and make sure that neighborhoods are safe, all within the parameters of the law. But I think a very important point here is that none of these things that I named, none of these branches, none of these neighborhood watches, none of these pothole fillers, none of them get paid. They're all volunteers. They're all doing it because they have to help their community. They don't earn a cent. They pay with their time. It actually costs them a lot of money and time and effort. For example, if you're part of a neighborhood watch, you're away from your family a few times a week at night. So it's all people doing it for free. They're doing it because their community needs them to do it, and none of them are getting a salary at the end of the day. And that's specifically what we do more directly with where our members are concerned. Lastly, before my answer gets too long, lastly, what we do for broader South Africa, not specifically just for our members, is that we do a lot of, for example, being a civil rights organization, we do a lot of court cases regarding freedom of speech, freedom of association, bodily autonomy, all these different constitutional rights that you have. So just one example that shows you how this works, or to demonstrate it, where we took on, for example, draconian lockdown measures during the COVID-19 pandemic, where we had camps that were set up for people entering South Africa, where they were sent there. We had those camps closed. We have had court cases where we've won, where we forced the government to build schools that they promised other communities, most notably in Kandla. And then also we've got court cases where we are fighting for where the law has failed people, and that would be, for example, I think everyone knows the case of Senzo Mayiwa, where the law failed, justice failed. There wasn't justice in that case, so therefore we got involved there. And maybe just lastly, to use that case as an example of what we do for the broader South Africa and how that affects our members. Why we took up, for example, that case is that, and I told you this when you visited Afriforum, is that if the goalkeeper of Bafana Bafana, the national soccer team, can get murdered and there's no justice for someone of that high profile, and you can't catch those killers and you don't know what happened there, and the justice system kind of just expects you to forget about it and move on, If that can happen to someone with that higher profile, it can happen to anyone, and it can happen to our members as well. So our members give us money to do cases like that as well, because that sets a precedent. If we get success there and we get justice for example, in that case of Senzo Maiwa, that will make sure there's a bigger chance that if they are ever also in a similar position, that there will be justice for them as well.
Yo, geez. You know, my concern listening to you is most of the work you're doing is work that government is meant to be doing. Why did you guys decide to do government's job, number one? And number two, do you ever find pushback from the government? Because I've heard stories of people closing potholes and then municipalities come and dig them up again. Do you ever get pushback? And why did you guys decide to do government's job instead of maybe just going straight into politics?
So I know this is definitely something, when I describe a lot of the things that we do, a lot of even our members will be thinking, but I already pay tax. This is something I'm paying VAT for, income tax for, all these fuel levies for. Tax affects us all. We all pay tax in some form. A lot of tax is just more stealthy. You don't even know you're paying it like VAT. And I mean, with the petrol, but we all have to pay that those fuel levies as well. That's a tax. So, but yes, that's a genuine concern. It's not fair. Definitely not fair. It's actually a tragedy that you're paying these taxes and then communities still have to do things themselves that the government is doing. But to answer your question, why are we doing it? Very simply, because we have to. You have to. Otherwise, the street where you drive to work to is going to be filled with so many potholes that you're going to have to buy new tires every month. If you don't do it, there's not going to be street signs. There's going to be car collisions and crashes every day in your street and in your neighborhood. If you take the logic of, well, the government should be there to keep me safe through the police, and I'm not going to spend my time doing a neighborhood watch because I already pay tax for the government to keep me safe. Well, the government's failing to keep you safe. Then you're going to live in a crime-ridden neighborhood. Is that what you want? You want your children not to be able to walk in the street. So it's out of necessity. You have to. And to demonstrate that, it's like when if those people that were on the Titanic, they were on the Titanic and they hear the ship is sinking. And they say, this is not fair. I bought a ticket to have a safe journey.
It's not my responsibility.
It's not my responsibility. The ship should have been better built. The ship should have been safe. I paid my ticket. That's tax. You say, well, I paid my tax. There should be no pothole. There should be no crime. The government should be doing all these things. But it's not fair. So what are you going to do? The ship's sinking. Are you going to go sit in the corner and cry because it's not fair because you paid your ticket? Or are you going to start building some life rafts and make sure you save as many people as possible?
Yeah. Do you ever get pushback from government for the work that you're doing?
Yeah, that's the second leg of your question. Yeah. Well, we get pushback in different forms. So what you named there of potholes being dug up, I don't remember a specific instance of that happening. Doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I don't want to spread rumors or say anything that just because it will make the government look bad. There are things that I can name that people can go look up. Good example is Soltech. So Afriforum is part of the Solidariteit movement. So the Solidariteit movement built the technical college Soltech through grassroots fundraising and the community's money. The Soltech is built specifically in a country where technical colleges are falling apart, and specifically where Afrikaans people can't go study in their mother tongue technical skill like electrician or plumbing. We created an opportunity for that through the community's money. So the example where we get pushback from the government is then when someone like Panyaza Lesufi says, well, you're not allowed to do that. You can't have your own Afrikaans Soltech. You're not allowed to do that. Now, they haven't been able to close it down. They haven't been able to destroy it, but they threaten it. They say, you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do this. Well, we are allowed to do it because the Constitution allows it. We're using our own money. We're not stealing money from anyone to do it. Yeah. We're not taking government tax money to do it. We're using our own money, even though we still pay taxes. So another example where we get pushback is when we, for example, do neighborhood watches. So during the lockdown of 2020 and 2021, specifically 2020, there was the government said you're not allowed to do neighborhood watches during the lockdown. Like this is But then I can't remember exactly what the result there was. I think we just ended up still doing the neighborhood watches because it was an imperative to keep our community safe, and that's justification enough. But yeah, we get all this type, but it's more of like a threatening tone and rhetoric from the government. But they always fail to really throw a spanner in our works, because everything we do is within the law. Everything we do is within what the Constitution allows. There's nothing we're doing that they can stop based on the law or the Constitution. So basically everywhere where they want to stop something is just because the government doesn't like that we're doing it better than them. It is making them look bad. For example, Soltech, that we built with 300 million rand, while the Gauteng government under Panyaza Lesufi used 300 million rand or 400 million rand more to sanitize schools that were empty. So there you go. I mean, that's not what you want out there. You don't want the newspapers reporting on that. That makes you look bad. So of course you're getting that type of pushback, but they've not been able to really hurt us or to do anything that seriously impedes what we do. We just keep doing what we're doing because it's the right thing and it's necessary.
Panyaza Lesufi is now the premier of Gauteng. I think at that time he was still the MEC of education. Wouldn't stuff like that get people like yourselves, by yourself I mean a white Afrikaner, wouldn't something like that make you very angry? Because you've got a black African politician saying that you can't have an Afrikaans-speaking university that's private, and almost doing it in English. It's not even like he was attacking you guys in isiZulu or Setswana or anything. Like, it's almost like black politicians have become representatives of the British monarch. We want to preserve English, but they have an issue with an indigenous South African language being Afrikaans. Doesn't that make you angry?
It would make me angry if I still believe that politicians are very powerful players in the future. I think politicians are becoming less relevant, and organizations and community-based solutions are becoming more relevant. So if the political paradigm, the politician model was becoming more powerful and was the way of the future, I would be angry and frustrated and even scared. But it's going the other way. It's going the other way. They are, and it's not just happening in South Africa. It's happening all across the world. Specifically on the African continent, you can see it happening. Where
civil organizations are rising.
Organizations, community-based solutions, where communities are just saying we're going to do it ourselves. We're not going to wait for government any longer. Because there's this classic joke of a politician that promises everyone, when I win, I will buy you all new shoes. And then everyone votes for him, and then he wins. And then the people come and ask, where's our new shoes? He said, well, you didn't give me your shoe size, so I can't give you your new shoes. And that's how it works. That's how politics works. You make all these promises, and then you don't fulfill them based on a technicality. So, yes, just to get back to specifically your question, the future is community-based. The future is organization-based. The future is decentralized, not centralized. And we don't have to ask permission to build our own university. We don't have to ask permission to fill potholes. We don't have to ask permission to take our safety into our own hands. These are things that we're allowed to do, and these are things that more people should be doing. And that's the thing. When it comes to, for example, party politics, I think this flows from that question. Don't disregard it. I think you still should go vote. It's still an important part of our country's political landscape, but it's dwindling. It shouldn't be your main focus. If your party doesn't win or your party doesn't do as well as it should, then you shouldn't go sit and cry in the corner and say, well, the future is hopeless. Well, that just means your political party is not going to come save you. You're going to have to go do something yourself. So that's why I'm very glad to be in the solution industry where I work, where I'm working on the solutions for the future, where you don't need politicians to fix your potholes. You don't need politicians to keep you safe. It's gonna be a lot of hard work. It's not gonna be easy, but we got into the mess where we are now because we took the easy route. And I mean people all across the world, communities specifically. Communities outsource their responsibilities to their governments, and now their governments are failing, and now they don't know how to do those things anymore.
Sure.
There's a lot of things you could be doing yourself that the government doesn't need to do, and that's how we got here. The problem is we've just become lazy, and we've become the devil's favorite honey to tempt you with is convenience. Says, well, it's convenient, and then the government steps in. The government says, well, don't you worry about security. I'll keep you safe. Don't worry about water. I'll give you water. Don't worry about electricity. I will give you electricity. And then the day comes with load shedding, and now we have water shedding, and then you have police not showing up even if you call them.
Yeah.
Now you have police showing up the next day if you call them. But it's all these responsibilities that you gave up to the government. You said, when the government said, can I handle water? You don't have to care about or worry about water. Community said, yes, do it. When the government said, can we handle electricity? The community said, yeah, you can handle electricity. When the government said, do you really want to worry about security? Do you want me to take that off your hands? Community said, yes, I'd rather be watching football, watching soccer, and catering with my friends than driving in a neighborhood watch. I mean, I can understand. That's human nature to do it. Like I said, this is not any specific community in South Africa. This is communities all across the world. It's during this state-based paradigm that this happened. But now we're exiting. We're leaving the state-based paradigm now. States all across the world are failing. They're failing in all their responsibilities. They're not bringing the promises that they made, and people are getting sick and tired of it. And that's out of that necessity, out of that state failure, that failure of centralization, that we are now finding the creation of organizations like Afriforum domestically and abroad. You see all these different organizations coming to the fore as well that said, we are now going to start working on an alternative solution. I mean, it's that whole quote of the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
I'm thinking of the irony of you guys having to go and get government to build a school in Nkandla where ex-President Jacob Zuma's from, you know. Your relationship with Solidariteit, number one, and then number two, is Afriforum a white party? So would that mean Soltech as an institution is a white-only institution?
So for the first question, our relationship to Solidariteit, there are sister organizations. So they are a labor union, but Solidariteit existed first. It was just Solidariteit. Okay. And then Solidariteit realized, but they can't be doing all these civil rights cases. That's not what a union does. That will take away all their funds and their focus, and they can't focus on what they're good at. Yeah. So then we started Afriforum. So Afriforum is in part of the Solidariteit movement, which incorporates Solidariteit and Afriforum. Okay. So their offices are just across the street. This isn't some conspiracy theory. This isn't something you can discover. It's real. It's there. It's as clear as day.
Fair enough.
In regards to the second question, the example of Soltech, is it a white institution? No, there's a lot of black students already going there. The only thing is it's an Afrikaans institution. Because you can't go anywhere else to study to become a plumber or an electrician or any of these trades in your home language of Afrikaans, we created an institution where you can. But if you're proficient in Afrikaans and you can pay the fees, then you can study there. And there's some great stories already coming out. There was this one story. So Soltech has existed longer than the campus. Soltech as an institution has been going on for longer, but the campus was built in 2020. But there's this story of a black student that went to Soltech, and then afterwards, when he left Soltech, he got a job, and he did so well in his new job that his manager told him, go back to where you studied, bring 5 of your friends, and I'll give them a job immediately if they work as well as you. And he comes back and he brings 5 white oaks. And he asks, like, why you bring? I said, bring 5 of your friends. Like, these are my university friends from Soltech.
Beautiful.
And that's the thing. You've got this institution that's producing students that immediately when they leave, they get a job because their qualifications are high quality. They are passionate about what they do, and they studied in their mother tongue. Don't underestimate the power of studying in the language that you think. Yeah. If you're studying in a language that you don't think, it's already double the challenge.
Double the work.
Yeah. So people know when people are studying in their mother tongue, they're probably going to understand the work better. They're going to be much better at what they do. So people, when they leave Soltech, if you talk to someone from there, they'll give you a much clearer idea of the statistic. But I think it's something like 9 in 10 that leave Soltech have within the first year of leaving, they have a job. And
have you heard of? Sorry, I'm disturbing you. Please finish your point.
No, that is the end.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, have you heard of similar organizations in this country? Because what I know about Afriforum is you're not a white organization, you are a cultural organization with a focus on Afrikaans, but other minority groups. Knowing that there are so many colored people that speak Afrikaans and there's some black people, do you know other organizations that represent something similar? Like let's say a Zulu cultural organization that is also not race-based. Maybe it's got white people who identify with Zulu. Or I know we have Christian and Muslim and Jewish organizations, but from a cultural perspective, outside of Afriforum, have you heard of other cultural groups in this country?
So what makes that a difficult question is the fact that Afriforum is already a pioneer in regards to how big we've gotten. I think we're the largest civil rights organization on the African continent with our amount of members. But this doesn't mean that other organizations like us don't exist. The problem is you don't hear about them because they're very small and very local based. So how I know they exist is all different branches in any place, in Nelspruit or in anywhere in Cape Town or in Die Moot or anywhere. They often work with these organizations, these other organizations on a grassroots level, but these organizations are only locally based. They've not grown to the size that Afriforum has. That's where Afriforum is unique in a large extent. So you read about Afriforum on the front pages, but because of our size. When we started off, when we were also just a small local organization, we were not on the front pages. We were not being written about. So these organizations definitely exist, and I can guarantee you that because I've seen them work with our different branches on the ground. But I can't remember their names because they are you quickly hear about them, but they're not reported on in the media. They are very, very hyper local based, hyper niche in regards to they represent a neighborhood or they represent a part of a town or they represent just a specific cultural group in a town. So they're very small currently, but they are growing very fast. And the few, like I said, this is like when you sow seeds in a field. They don't grow immediately into big mealy plants. They start off as little tiny plants, and you might even miss them. You might step on them if you don't see them. But that's currently the stage where a lot of these community-based organizations are. They're very small plants. You might miss them if you don't look very carefully. But they are there, and they are growing very fast. And I can guarantee you one thing. Within the next 5 years, you're going to start reading about those organizations on the front pages as well, just like you did with Afriforum. They are going to start growing very quickly and very fast, and they're going to become a household name, just like Afriforum did.
That's beautiful. Congrats on the success you guys have achieved. Why do you think you guys have achieved the success you've had, number one? And number two, do you think other labor unions outside of Solidariteit have looked to emulate the model, or do they even care? Do you have any intel on that?
So let's start off first with that, the second question. Are other labor unions trying to emulate Solidarity? Well, I don't see them doing it because they've got much more money than Solidarity is not the richest one by far, but they're not doing. I don't see them using that money to build schools or universities or to even start community-based organizations like Solidarity did with Afriforum. So unfortunately, I can't answer that question because I haven't seen it, but maybe there could be plans behind the scenes. I doubt it, but maybe. When it comes to why we're successful is we are not pro status quo organization. This might sound strange to a lot of our critics. They say we're defending the status quo, but if you look at our model that we use, it's completely the opposite of the status quo. The status quo currently is the model of centralization that I touched on earlier. So our battle today, not just in South Africa, all across the world, specifically in countries in Europe, you're seeing it now very clearly, is a battle between centralizers and decentralizers. And what I mean by that is the centralization of power. The centralizers want as much power as possible in as few hands as possible, in the hands of a massive government or in the hands of a massive union like the European Union or the United States, which is also a union. The African Union's another example. These are all centralizer projects, centralizing power in a smaller and smaller collection of organizations. Decentralizers like Afriforum and many other community-based organizations want to break that up. We want to break up power so it is distributed and is more people hold power than just a handful of people. So just some examples on to mess with your viewers' minds a little bit, but it's going to make you think. Why do you think when it comes to, for example, border control, Afriforum is strong on border control and thinks there should be strong border security, just like the majority of Black South Africans, while the EFF says there should be open borders, and they agree with the majority of white liberals in this country? Why do you think that is? Because on the one side, you've got centralizers. They want a union of countries, and then they want borderless countries. It's all just centralizing to a massive Africa-scale government. That's centralism. That's the one model. Afriforum and the majority of Black South Africans that think there should be border security are on the other side of that debate, saying there should be countries, there should be regions, there should be borders. We can't just blend everything together.
Sure.
So that's one example. Another example, as you mentioned earlier, with the ANC using a lot of the rhetoric of the British, that's very funny. The fact that, let's just take something from history. The Afrikaners in the previous century, what we did was we left the British Commonwealth. What does the ANC do once it gets into power? Within the first year, it rejoins the British Commonwealth. Why is that? Why? Just ask yourself, just a rhetorical question, why is that? Because again, Commonwealth is centralization, a centralized model. So you want all these different countries part of a network. That's centralization, creating all these networks that are just centralizing power smaller and smaller. Afriforum, on the other side, does not want that type of centralization. We think countries should represent themselves. Communities should represent themselves. Actually, that power, we want to take it further. It should not just be a country model. There should be communities who represent themselves, cities who represent themselves, smaller and smaller. It's that federal idea of if a smaller collection of people or social association can handle something, a bigger one shouldn't be handling it. So let's take the example of electricity. If a small association like a town is capable of handling its own electricity, it should not be forced to use leave electricity to a larger association, being the national government and Eskom. Another example is a family versus the community, where the other side of that coin is a family can't realistically keep its neighborhood safe. So that the family is the smallest possible social unit or social association. If they're not capable of handling and managing security, then a larger association can take over. So that means a neighborhood watch. That's the principle that we're working with at Afriforum. If a smaller social unit or a smaller community or a smaller social association can handle something, they should, not the bigger one. If the town can do it, the government shouldn't have to. If the city can, or if a neighborhood can do it, the city doesn't have to. That's the way it should work. And that's, again, just to finish off, there's that debate. The big divide is not between black and whites in the world and in South Africa currently. It's not between right and left. It's been between people that want to centralize power and people that want to break up power and distribute it and decentralize it.
That's a really great way of thinking, because we wouldn't have potholes if people applied that type of thinking where they're like, we can close this hole ourselves. As long as you guys can give us back some of our tax money and allow us to do it. I mean, it's our cars that are jumping into these things. Last two questions from me. The first one being, does Afriforum have a relationship with the town of Orania? And then closing off, what is your favorite thing about working for Afriforum?
Afriforum does not have Orania is not an Afriforum project. We do visit there often. I was there now with work just recently. Again, Afriforum's relationship with Orania is based on that, what I just talked about, that centralization. Orania is an example of a town doing everything themselves, at least striving to do everything themselves. They're now trying to get off Eskom, for example, firstly. So they're building solar panels, and they're equipping houses with solar panels. They're trying to take power away from the bigger, mega Leviathan government and decentralizing it to a smaller scale. And Afriforum supports that idea. If there's any other town in the country, whether it be in KwaZulu-Natal in the Northern Cape, whether it be a town of only Zulus or only Coloureds or only Afrikaners or only Indians, any group, if they want to take their town off the grid and they want to make sure their town is staatsbestand, state-proof, then we will support them and we will do exactly, we will build a relationship with them just as we have with Orania. But like I said, Orania is not an Afriforum project.
Sure.
But any town that's doing what they're doing, where they are decentralizing power rather than centralizing it, we will gladly work with them and we will build a relationship with them because that is the future and that's the future we want to help build. Secondly, what's the best thing about working for Afriforum? Well, there's a lot of things, but firstly, it is that there hasn't been a day in my life where I've woken up and have been distraught at the fact that I have to drive to work now, or where I've been, I didn't want to go to work. It was always, I like going to work because I'm doing something that's meaningful and that's fulfilling and that's giving me positive goals in my life, and I'm working towards something bigger than myself. And that's why I would encourage anyone, if you live in a community anywhere in South Africa and there is some type of community-based solutions going on, like people picking up rubbish in your street, or people fixing potholes, or people painting houses, or just the community getting together, planting vegetables, go support that rather than watching the soccer. I mean, a lot of people are very busy. I know that. I don't think everyone should be giving up 12 hours out of their weekend to go work for or volunteer somewhere. But you have things that you could rather be doing than watching 5 hours of Netflix. Rather just watch 2 hours of Netflix and use the other 3 hours to go volunteer at a soup kitchen or go volunteer at any type of community-based thing that you're seeing in your neighborhood. Doesn't mean you're going to have to start Afriforum tomorrow, start a 300,000 member organization, then you can get to work. Afriforum started with 3 people. And a team is technically 2 people. So you start off with a team. You start off with a team of 2 people in your community. You say, we're going to start doing X or Y. You have to identify what do we need mostly. You start off with something simple, let's say with rubbish. You're not going to clean up the entire South Africa. That's not possible. So it's going to sound very counterintuitive because we all in school learned you have to save the country. You have to grow up. You have to become president and save South Africa. Start small. Because you're not going to be able to do that alone. Save your street first. Make sure let's say you identify the problem. South Africa has a litter problem. There's a lot of rubbish all across South Africa. You want to do something about it. You can't pick up all the rubbish all across the country. So you start off by saving your street. You pick up all the rubbish in your street and make sure there's no rubbish in your street. If there's too much rubbish in your street, make sure at least there's no rubbish in your backyard. There's no litter in your backyard. So you save your family and your house first. Then you save your street, then you save your neighborhood, then you save your town, and then you save the country. Beautiful. You build towards what is possible. You start with realistic goals. Because if you start with unrealistic goals, you're going to be demoralized by the end of the year because you're going to look back and think, I didn't achieve anything that I wanted to. I didn't save the country. So stop thinking big, start thinking small and realistic and within the neighborhood around you and within the house around you. If you think South Africa, there's a problem with criminality or there's a problem with morals, people not having proper morals, you're not going to teach the entire country proper morals tomorrow. Make sure there's proper morals being exercised in your house. Make sure nobody in your house steals. Make sure nobody in your house does anything that's illegal. That's with realistic. And then at the end of the year, you can look back and say to yourself, I achieved that. My goal was to make sure my house is a moral place where there's no criminality and no bad habits. I made sure that I achieved that this year. Then you can start building bigger. Then you say, now I want to make sure there's no criminality in my street. So then you team up with your neighbors and you team up with other people in your neighborhood that have the same type of goal. You work towards that. And you start with a small circle, bigger, 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 bigger. You work bigger and larger, and then in the end, you save your house, you save your street, you save your town, and then you save your country.
Meneer van Zyl, I want to say thank you very much for visiting us today. You seem to embody the terms of boer maak 'n plan and self-doen, which I know we've spoken about before. Ons waardeer dit regtig baie. The work that you're doing, that Afriforum is doing, and the fact that you're open to inspiring other people to learn from you. They can join you and help you do the work you're doing, but they can also do their own thing. So thank you very much, and I look forward to inviting you again soon.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.